with Foundations and Beyond Horsemanship, and this is Laura. She is going to be helping me with our video project today. So, when a horse comes through our client horse training program, at the end of the program, we require the owners to go through 6 hours of instruction with us going over training review. So this is Sugar. She has just finished her training with us, and we are going to put together a video showing a sample, if you will, of what we would go over in a normal training review session. We're not going to quite cover everything, but we're going to hit some of the basics and just kind of show you what it looks like, and hopefully this will be helpful for anybody else who has questions about what our horses learn when they come through training. I'm going to try to keep things fairly simple and not explain anything more than once or twice, because if you have questions about it or you need to play it again, you can just rewind and play it back. So today, Laura is going to be our pretend client, and she is going to play the part of the owner that I am instructing in the training review. Let's get started. So the first thing we go over in the training review is catching the horse. We expect our horses to come up. We never want to have to chase our horses to catch them. So the first thing we go over is how to cue our horses to come up to us when we catch them. So Laura, I want you to walk out in the middle of the pen. And, oh, Sugar is now distracted by the puppy. Okay, so walk out in the middle of the pen. So most people's reaction when they go to catch their horses is just walk straight up and halter them. We actually kind of do the opposite. We walk away from our horses and ask them to catch us. Sugar is doing a brilliant job of hooking right up to Laura and going ahead and following her. Laura, I want you to go ahead and ask her to follow you a bit more. Let's pretend Sugar didn't walk straight up. Laura would circle around towards her hindquarter and then ask her with her finger and give her a come here cue. There you go. Yep, that would be the signal that we'd use, and we will notice how Laura's tipping her hat towards the hindquarter and putting a little pressure there with her body language. It'd be just like that, and as soon as Sugar came in and hooked up, we'd go ahead and let her come and halter her. The next thing we're going to cover is putting the horse's head down for haltering and bridling. This is something we teach all of our horses to do. Laura, so we'll go ahead and give her the cue. The cue is put the hand on the wither and then run the hand down her neck towards the poll, and Sugar should just drop her head and keep it nice and close to Laura while Laura puts the halter on and ties it. We don't want our horses' heads to pop up while we're putting things on. If Sugar were to pop her head up, Laura would just place her hand on top of the pole and just gently press. And now when she is done haltering, there is a cue to release Sugar and tell her she can go ahead and put her head back up, and that's just gently press your hand under her jaw and just tell her she can put her head back up. If you do not use it, it will go away. If you keep it tuned up, use it every time you put the halter and the bridle on, it should stay nice and easy to do. Alright, now before we get into our groundwork review, there's a few very important concepts that we need to understand about the way this horse has been trained and the philosophy behind our methods. The two most important ones I'm going to talk to you about are body language and respect. Okay, how horses get respect from each other is moving each other's feet. The horse that can make everyone else move out of his way and get at first dibs at whatever he wants, that's the leader, okay? So we take the same concept that horses understand naturally, because that's the way that they are wired, and we apply it to our training. So in order for the horse to understand that we are the leader, we move their feet. Okay, so the first concept that we need to understand going into a relationship with a horse is they pick their leaders by the one who can make the others move, okay? The second concept we need to understand before moving into a relationship with a horse is they don't primarily communicate orally, okay? They're not really verbal animals. They communicate mostly when they're in close quarters with each other by body language, okay? So that is what is easier for them to understand when we start working with them, is to adapt our communication to their main method of communication that they are naturally wired for, which is body language. So when we're working on the ground with our horses, we want to communicate primarily by body language, because that is what they are naturally wired to see and understand. So right now, if you take a look at my body language, I'm standing straight on one hip and I've got the other leg cocked and I've got my shoulders slightly offset. This is what is classic relaxed body language. If I was to change from relaxed right here to active, I would stand straight on 2 legs, throw my shoulders back, throw my chest out, and bring my hands up here, okay? And stare intently at whatever it was that was frightening me or I needed to move. And then I just will slump back into my relaxed body language. When I don't need my horse to do anything, this is the look I want. I want my one leg cocked, I want to sink on one hip and my shoulders offset. When I do want my horse to do something, I want to make it blatantly clear that I need something out of him, okay? So I make a switch from my relaxed body language to a very intense, active body language. Now, when horses need another horse to move, what do? They pin their ears, and they lower their head and they pin their ears. So that's the kind of look we want to go for when we're trying to communicate with our horses on the ground. So right now I have my relaxed body language. When I need her to move in any way, I'm going to stand straight on my legs. I'm going to bend over and stare at her, whatever part of her I need to move, okay? The first one I'm going to show you is backing up, okay? This is a very simple, very basic groundwork exercise. It's one of the first things we teach. So first I'll rub her with my stick, make sure she's not frightened of it. The whole goal is respect without fear. I want my horse to be a partner, not a subordinate. Well, it is a subordinate in the fact that I'm the leader of the two. But I want my horse to not fear me. So I always like to rub with the stick and just check on them, make sure they're not frightened about it. I don't want them to be worried about it. This is not something to be scared about. It's a tool I use to help me. So I'll turn my body language on. I'll bring my stick up here and just tap the air in front of her nose. Don't move the stick very far, just a little bit. Okay, if she's not listening, I'll go ahead and give the rope a couple taps and ask her to back up. And then when I'm done, I'll just straighten up and relax, and she instantly recognizes that and goes, okay, I'm fine. She went to relaxed body language. Right. The next concept I need to talk to you guys about is the desensitizing sensitizing concept. Okay, our horses need to understand that not everything is a signal and not everything is going to hurt them. So we specifically practice doing things that would naturally scare them and teaching them that it's okay and that they can relax about it. Okay, we call these exercises desensitizing exercises. Anything where we ask our horse to relax and hold still about, it's a desensitizing exercise. Anything we want our horse to move and respond to, it's a sensitizing exercise. It's very important you keep those in balance. You don't want a horse that's super flighty and thinking everything is a signal. You don't want a horse that's so dulled down you can't get it to do what you want. How much of each thing you need to do is going to vary based on the horse you have. This particular horse is a quarter horse Arabian cross, so she's fairly balanced as far as temperament goes. She's not super hot and super flighty all the time, but she's not super lazy, super dull. She's pretty balanced in her personality, so you just stay fairly balanced in your desensitize to sensitize ratios. Okay, so Laura's going to go ahead and move into some desensitizing exercises for us. There are two main things that we desensitize our horses to before we move into anything else. One is our stick and string, because it's a tool that we use quite a bit to aid in our communication. You'll notice Laura is starting on the top line. We always start there because that's easiest for our horse to understand, because rain hits the top line, snow, hail, all that stuff. So they already kind of have a concept of things touching their top line that they're okay with. So when we start, we always start with the top line and then move to the legs, okay? That's the first thing. One of the first things we always desensitize to is our stick and string, and ourselves, obviously. We'll make sure our horses find us touching them. And then the second thing we need to make sure they're all right with is our lead rope, okay? Now, some people feel like they can't get this lead rope to go where they want it to go. It just takes a bit of practice, and you can make that tail longer or shorter as you need to reach the body parts you want. But it's just a matter of practicing tossing it where you want it to get to. And my best tip is to make sure it's out beside of you before you toss it towards your horse. And you just make sure you don't go too hard, because the idea is that it doesn't hurt them and you don't want them to get worried about it. You'll notice too that Laura switched sides. It's very important for your horse that you train on both sides equally. The pathway between left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain is called the corpus callosum. Horses do have one, but it is very small, okay? So when we're training horses, we pretend like they don't have one. We make sure we train both sides equally, because that pathway is so small. When your horse learns something on one side, it's almost a guarantee that he will not know it on his other side. you have to train two separate horses. You have left side and right side. You have lefty and righty. And you need to make sure both horses are okay with something. You can't just teach lefty and expect righty to get it. It's not going to work. Occasionally you'll see them pick up something on one side and translate it to the other side, but it's very, very, very rare. And so from a training standpoint, if you want your horse to be all right with something, you need to do it on both sides. You want your horse to know how to do something on both sides, you have to teach both sides separately. We're going to move right ahead into one of our sensitizing exercises. Again, this is one of the first things we teach our horses, is to yield their hindquarter. And it's very, very important when you're first beginning a relationship with a new horse, is that they understand very quickly how to move their hind end away from you. It's essential for getting their attention towards you and getting that hind end, which is arguably one of the more dangerous parts of the horse, to start getting it away from you and get their face in so they can start learning something. Now, when we're doing this particular exercise, this is a sensitizing exercise, so we use our body language to let our horse know we want to move. When we're putting any kind of a signal on our horse, we want to make sure we do it slowly, so we never surprise them with a signal that popped up out of nowhere. So anytime I turn my body language from neutral to on, I want to do it really, really slow. I like to tell people, take a count of 4. If this is neutral and this is on, I want people to take a count of 4 to get there. Nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So never, never do that too quickly, because very soon you will get your horse to be really worried about you telling him to do something. But you always want to make sure you release as fast as you can. So Laura, go ahead and do yield the hindquarter full circle. So you'll notice she always rubs first. I always like to rub with the stick first and check on my horse, make sure they're not going to be worried about it. Okay, just gently tapping the air above the hip. Tap the hip itself if the horse doesn't respond. As soon as the horse does move, you can go back to tapping the air. And then when you're done, straighten up and rub, 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 rub. Now you'll notice Laura made the transition from off to on very slowly, and from on to off quick as possible. And the reason for that is horses don't learn from pressure. They learn from the release. They learn from when it went away. To horses, pretty much everything that moves or makes a noise or does both is pressure. So anytime a person's moving, anytime something comes at them, anytime a weird noise comes up, that's pressure that they perceive. They don't learn from it, but they do learn from when it goes away. They don't like pressure, they don't like feeling uncomfortable. So when Laura turns her body language on and starts tapping on that hip, that's pressure to that horse. The horse has learned when that particular pressure comes on, if she yields her hip, that pressure will go away. Whenever you're training a horse, you'll get what you release for. If you're trying to tell him to do something and he's not doing it and he's not doing it, and then you take it off, he just learned to not do that thing. If you're asking him to do something and then he finally does it and you get off of him, he just learned to do that thing. Okay? So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're training the horse, to release when you get what you want, not before then. Okay, Laura, go ahead and do a yield behind quarter circle on this side, please. We're not going to do everything on both sides throughout this video, but we will do this one. Again, this is yield the hindquarters, stage 1. It's one of our very first lessons that we teach our horses. Now, in the beginning, we're only getting one step at a time, but Sugar knows well enough now to do full circle every time pretty easy. Now, she's locked that front foot and she's pivoting on it, which is what we want. That's exactly what we want her to do, is lock that front end and pivot. If she does step forward with that front foot that's closest to you, that's the one we want her to lock and pivot on. If she does step forward with it, you have the lead rope in this hand and you're just going to give a sharp bump backwards to correct. Ideally, she should cross her hind legs with bringing that foot that's closest to you across in front of the other hind leg, and lock that front foot that's closest to you. Just pivot on it really nicely. And the other thing to keep in mind with these exercises is none of them are difficult or technical or super complex. They're just a set of specific steps. As long as you do them in order and keep in mind the rules we've laid out, you'll be just fine, okay? So don't get too overwhelmed. Just keep things nice and simple. When you do yield the hindquarters, you're going to have your rope in one hand, stick in the other, body language, tap the air above her hip, tap her if she doesn't listen, get off when she does it right, and rub, rub, rub. Okay? Moving on. The next exercise we're going to show you guys is our tap the air backing up. So as before, and it's super, super simple. If you've learned how to yield the hindquarters, all the same steps apply to this one. So first thing you do is just rub on the forehead with the stick, and then you're going to turn your body language on, tap the air in front of her nose, and tap the rope if need be. This horse is very responsive to the signal by now. She's probably not going to need it. Okay? So you can either follow her backwards with your feet or just feed rope through your hand so that she doesn't pull herself on the lead rope. And when you are done with this exercise, it's very important you don't pull on that lead rope to make her stop. You want to just follow her along as she drifts to a stop and rub that forehead with the stick. Alright, the next exercise we'll show you is our wiggle wave backup. For this one, it's super easy. You just jiggle the lead rope just a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. If she doesn't respond, you can wave the rope a bit harder. And as with the other backup exercises, either walk forward with your feet to stay close enough to her, or you can feed the lead rope through your hand. You just want to make sure she doesn't pull herself on that lead rope when you're telling her to back up, because that is very confusing for them. And when you're done, you just relax and go ahead and rub with the stick again. Now the next one we'll show you is what we call our steady pressure backup, which is essentially just a light, gentle pressure on the halter to have her back up, which is a very handy one to have if you need to back up the horse in a close space. And it's just super, super light cue. All I want you to do is lift up that rope and take the weight of the clip off her halter. I don't want you to really pull her backwards, so you just lift up that weight and she will feel that on that halter and back right up. If she doesn't respond to the light pressure, then you could go ahead and bump on it a couple of times and then go back to the light pressure. Or will you demonstrate that? So we've just got our light pressure, bump, bump, and then the light pressure again, and then we just drop it when she's doing good. That's a nice quick release. You just drop that thing. Right, the next exercise we're going to show you is our yield the forequarters. So really, really similar to what we did with our yield the hindquarters. We want some body language and just tapping the air with the stick, and we would like her front feet to cross and her hind end to stay stationary. So you just start off with that body language and tapping the air, and you can go ahead and tap her if she doesn't respond to the light pressure. And then just go back to the air. Okay, she's making some mistakes, but there we go. That's a nice step with her front legs, and just keeping her hind end stationary right there. Rub, rub, rub. Very good. As with the backup exercises, it's important you stay close enough that the horse doesn't pull themselves on the lead rope, okay? So you'll notice Laura's hand is staying really nice and close to the face, so there's plenty of slack between her hand and the horse's halter. And it's really important you stay close when you stop as well. So right there, Laura's going to shut her body language off and follow the horse. If the horse did move extra, Laura would just stay nice and close and rub her to a stop. You don't want to pull on your horse and make them stop, because then they'll learn to just go, 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 go until you pull on them and tell them to stop. This way, Sugar knows she has to keep an eye on Laura and watch for when that signal comes on, and when the signal comes off, she can stop. Now, these three groundwork exercises that I just showed you are yield the hindquarters, some backup, and yield the forequarters. These three are your foundation. If you keep these three working properly, you'll pretty much be okay. Because when you get control of the horse's hind end, you get the horse to understand to move away from you backwards, and you get control of their front end, those three parts are your foundation and your key for all the rest of your groundwork. Okay? If you're having trouble with any of the other groundwork exercises we show you in this video, come back to these three and get these three to work properly, and then try the exercise again. And most of the time you'll find that it will resolve. That's why we call these three, our hindquarter, our backup, and our yield the forequarter, our three primary groundwork exercises. They're like our primary colors. All the other groundwork exercises are based off these three. If you're having trouble down the line, your odds are pretty good. You need to come back here and get these three to work. Right, this next exercise we're going to show you is what we call lunging for respect, stage 1. Lots of people do lunging, but there's a few specific steps you can take to make it actually an effective tool for having your horse understand you're the leader and you're moving their feet. Okay, so we're going to go ahead to Laura now. First thing you need to do is make sure you point really high so that your horse has perfect clarity in the direction you want them to go. As soon as the horse takes off and starts trotting, Laura will drop her point hand because you don't want to be nagging your horse around the circle constantly. You would like to come back to neutral, and when you're in neutral, your horse should just stay doing what they're doing because they're doing it just fine. So you'll notice Laura's hand is not floating out away from her body, it's staying very close to her body. Sugar's making a few mistakes, but that's okay. When your horse makes a mistake, you just have a good chance to correct it. Just go ahead and point and then cluck and then bring the stick if you need to. Good. Okay? So we'll just practice this for a minute until Sugar gets going a bit steadier around the circle. She's really wanting to drift over to where I and the cameraman are. The cameraman being Terrence, her primary trainer. Horses are more comfortable around their leaders. To Sugar, Terrence is her primary leader because he's been moving her feet for the last 6 weeks or so. So it's very natural for her to want to drift towards him and try and get some comfort. So that's okay. We'll just practice this till Sugar gets a little bit settled in going around. Second thing I want to point out too, what Laura's doing in her lunging versus what a lot of people might do is Laura's walking this circle. She's actively walking a smaller circle that's maybe 6 feet in diameter inside of the circle Sugar is trotting. What that does, when you walk like that and keep your body facing your horse, their brain, because it's wired to see things like that, translates that to Laura is moving her feet. Laura's body is facing her, Laura's energy is driving towards her, and Laura is the one making her move. This is really, really crucial. I don't want you to just stand in neutral in the middle and turn on the pivot post. You need to walk this circle so your horse understands that you are the leader and you're moving her feet. Okay, when we go to stop, there's a few very specific steps to do to make sure it goes well, and none of them are hard, so bear with me here. You're going to bring the stick up in front of you and then open 3 fingers from that stick. You're going to hold it in like an OK sign. Okay, and you can be as slow with this as you like, there's no hurry. And then you're going to put the lead rope in those fingers. And then you'll have your free hand, which is going to be your left in this instance, and you'll just slide it down the rope, grab it, pull it, yield their hindquarters. Okay? And when you yield those hindquarters, that's when you stop walking forward in a circle. You just stop your feet, use some body language, and swing your stick up from behind you over. Laura, go ahead and swing the stick to demonstrate, please. When you do yield the hindquarters, you're going to use some body language and swing that stick. You don't want to sweep your horse's hindquarters around sideways. You want to bring the stick up from behind you, over and down. Okay? And make sure you have some body language. Okay? This is the action you don't want to take, is sweeping your horse around. That's not what we're after. We're after a nice up and over on top. And that gives your horse lots of clarity that you want them to move their tail out from under the stick. When you sweep them around, it just adds confusion and they feel like they're not going to be able to get away from you. When you bring the stick up and over, nice and clear, they understand quite clearly to get out from under it. As a general rule of thumb, in all your groundwork sessions, you want to finish on a desensitizing exercise. This is just a general rule of thumb. This isn't set in stone, hard and fast, but it's highly recommended, especially if you have an Arabian or Arabian cross. You want to make sure you keep them in balance to the desensitizing side. What Laura's doing right now is what we call spanking the ground, and you don't have to do it this long either. It depends on the horse how long you need to do it. You want to swing from the shoulder, not from the elbow. You'll get a lot better aim and reduce your chances of whacking your horse. Just keep that arm straight and swing from the shoulder. You don't need to be that close to the horse. Start where you're comfortable. If you're like, I can't do it, I'm not gonna hit her, that's okay. Just start a little bit farther away and build up your confidence as you get more practice. Okay? This is just a really excellent desensitizing exercise because it gets the horse used to a bit of a scary sound as well as the motion. You just do 5 licks on each side. With a horse that's seen it this many times, this is all you're going to need. Obviously, you want to go longer if she's being scared about it. This ties into what I said earlier about horses learning from the release of pressure. If we were to release that spank when she was shuffling around, she would learn to shuffle around in response to it. Because we never let that off until she relaxes, she knows really well now that she's supposed to relax when something like that happens.